We're going to be talking about arm injuries in baseball, especially pitching injuries. I have 4 tiers. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see my little sticky notes. 4 tiers to what I perceive. And again, like, this is not to be right. This is not to be wrong. I'm just giving my take. I think there's valuable insights for maybe parents to hear. So we're just going to get into it. 4 tiers of why I see injuries these days kind of on the uptick. 1, velocity. If you want a job, you got to throw hard. The secret's out. You got to throw hard. If you want a job, you got to throw hard. I see it even somewhat in college these days, but obviously less in college, more so in affiliated ball, professional baseball. Velocity matters. It's just like, don't let numbers hurt your feelings, in the sense of you got to throw hard if you want opportunities, because statistics show, man, like, the less time you have to react to the pitch as a hitter, harder it's going to be. You know what I'm saying? Harder, the numbers go down when the velocity is going up. So it's no secret. We have the data. Let's use that to our benefit. It's out there. Second, this brake pedal approach, the do less approach, right? I'll never forget the year I got drafted. It was the first time I heard the quote of save your bullets and your arm only has so many throws and all this stuff. And it was like, that was my first realization of how this industry is kind of confused, I would say, in terms of developing the best possible thrower, the best possible baseball player. Pitching is the one specific task in all of sports where it's like you're expected to be better at it by doing less. To me, that doesn't make sense. The do less approach to me is something that I see as a tier that's going to influence injuries, because I think when it comes to the adaptation and it comes to the preparation, we're brake pedal approaching a lot of these kids coming up, even like 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15-year-olds with pitch limits and throwing restriction and limitations and scheduled throwing programs and X amount of throws at X amount of feet and for X amount of time. And again, I shouldn't say like putting everyone, obviously not every single freaking academy or team does this, but I see it a lot of times where you put these training wheels on these kids and you don't allow them to adapt. You don't allow their bodies to just slowly but surely adapt to the physical stresses of throwing. And I've said this for years now, and I know it sparks a good debate, but it's like, the more you do something, like the more your body does something, the better it's going to be at adapting to that, to be able to continuously do that over time. So that goes for like hard throws, rainbow throws, pull down throws, like any drill progression, sliders, catch play, freaking flat ground mound. It doesn't matter, right? Like, the more you do something, the more you're just going to be able to adapt to it over time, right? Whatever that stimulus is. And I see it now with, like, obviously the pitching injuries that are happening at a youth level, like a really youth level. To me, it's a byproduct of telling these kids, like, do less, go throughout their day, don't blow it out. And then they get into a game hit with all this adrenaline and it's like, all right, let's go. And they're not quite adapted. A really good example of this too, which kills me, is like the College World Series and Major League Baseball playoffs. Because it's like you go all season with these set kind of schedules and these routines of like starters. They start the game and they go X amount of innings, bullpen comes in. And, the bullpen comes in, closer or 7th inning guy, 8th inning guy, 9th inning guy. They're pretty much going to be 1 inning. I saw Clay Holmes last night go 1 and change. So that's going to happen for the closer. And then all of a sudden, like, playoffs comes around and now you're going back to back to back to back. I saw a guy, I think it was last year, Spores, Texas, right? I think he threw in like 6 straight games. And then the work stimulus, right? Like the workload, the tolerance, all that, like that just goes to a totally different level when it's the most important time of the year for the team, which never makes sense to me. You're asking these guys to do, it's doing their job, but it's kind of doing it in a different manner. And me being someone that looks so detailed at the process and the preparation, right? The preparing of your body and your mind for performance. Like, when I really look into that, that's one thing that's never made sense to me in the game. When it comes down to like the most important games, we get it. We get these guys out of their roles. We get starters that go into the bullpen, and that's not me being, sugarcoating it. Not me saying that they shouldn't be able to do that. Obviously they should, but it's like something that I believe that we should practice and we should train and adapt our bodies to being able to do that. The 6, 7 games in a row. The fascinating thing that I always look at, and it's a good conversation too, is like the old timers, right? We always talk about the old timers and how like they didn't get hurt. They threw billions of innings a year and they threw billions of pitches a game, and they just went out and smoked a cigarette and they were fine. And the thing that I look at that and go, shoot, it makes sense, is the truth behind like the adaptation that your body goes through when it comes to throwing. Everyone's kind of quick to say the overhead throwing motion is not a regular motion and we should be in fear of it because it's not something that we're designed to do. No chance. I don't believe that. Warrior ancestors had to throw freaking spears to get food, right? Like, we can throw, and it's something that you can essentially manipulate it to be a natural movement, right? I'll never say that I don't like to say that I speak from absolutes in really anything, but the one main thing that I found when I look through my entire career, and again, everyone's experiences are going to be different, but the reason why I am passionate about a particular subject like this is because when I look at my career, it's just night and day. Like the times in my career where I wasn't good, I wasn't feeling good mentally and physically. It's just because my throws, were down. Everything was regulated. Everything was controlled. There was no freedom. There was no natural athletics movement, and everything was, timed. It was X amount of throws at this distance. Don't go past this distance. And it was just confinement and restriction. And I fear that as we keep going as a sport and we get in more fear of injuries and trying to prevent injuries, we put up these safe guidelines of like limiting workload and tolerance and all. And again, not saying I'm right, but I fear that alone is going to be what makes the problem worse. So far we have velocity, the do less approach, the brake pedal approach. Now moving on to the third tier, as I see, is the design, right? That's a very popular terminology to throw around in today's baseball industry, is talking about design, pitch design. We are setting aside time now, whereas like in the past, it was like when you threw your bullpens and you had a specific emphasis on a breaking pitch, right? Like it wasn't necessarily you were getting a bunch of slow-mo cameras and like really fine-tuning the movement and the manipulation of the fingers and the wrist on the baseball and looking at data to see if you can put feel versus real together to see how that correlates to a specific spin efficiency or horizontal movement profile or whatever. Back in the day, it was like you throw a bullpen, you're like, all right, I want to work on my breaking ball today. We're going to start with breaking balls, early in count, flip it up, boom, boom, boom. All right, let's go to the dirt, boom, boom. With the design aspect of it nowadays, I see a lot of guys that are spending a lot of time on throwing 27 sliders in a row and manipulating their wrist to see if they can hit a certain data point that they want. I'll just be honest and say that I fear that the constant manipulation of things, right? When it comes to the movement of your pitch, when we break it down in super slow-mo video and we use all these data analytics sources, that's only gonna add into the fact that a slider is probably not the healthiest thing on your elbow. I know there's new studies coming out about supination versus pronation and the force behind your fingers. Technically, the fastball should be, I get it. I just think that when it comes to the youth guys, they want to be like the pros. They see the design, they see the usage and all that, and they go, boom, let's do it. Now we have 12-year-olds ripping sliders, 50 of them in a row in a design setting, all these things, man. So I just fear that with the design aspect of it, we're getting away from just the natural throwing motion of someone just coming up being infielder, outfielder, position player, just a kid, just being a kid and throwing and experiencing different types of stimulus as you go throughout that journey. Now what you're doing is you're kind of taking that away and you're a pitcher. We have to design things now. And it gets put in this box and you don't allow for the durability of those ligaments and tendons to take an effect, right? Piggybacking off of design would be my fourth tier and talking about performance. And that just is a bullet point for me to remember that nowadays pitching, the way that we approach pitching is just different. Let's just be honest. The way that guys go out and pitch, it's different, dude. When I got drafted in 2010, the big MO, dude, was pitch off your heater. You're going to throw your fastball 60, 70% of the time. You're going to throw it early and you're going to throw it often. You're going to command it. If you didn't have fastball command, you were not going to be a starting pitcher. That was just the reality of it. And then it was always regulating the control of your breaking ball usage, making sure that your breaking ball usage was drastically lower than the heater. And even when at points in time when I was in specific organizations that really preached the changeup, it was like, nope, we throw the changeup first time through the lineup as opposed to throwing the breaking ball. Never forget, man, one of my years when I was struggling there, it was like the only thing I had a feel for was like the breaking ball. I felt better supinating the wrist, feeling it come off the fingers, and they wouldn't let me throw a breaking ball. They would not let me throw a breaking ball until I had thrown like the changeup first. It was fastball changeup, like first time through the lineup. It was so regulated, dude. This just like ugh, freaks me out just talking about it. I'm a freaking peacock. I gotta fly. Anyways, wouldn't let me throw the slider, so like then you get this restriction of like, man, now I gotta force the changeup and all these things. The fourth and final tier to this injury aspect, in my opinion on this injury thing, is the way that we approach performance, right? It's like the old school approach to pitch off your heater has kind of been outdated. Now it's like, hey, this game's hard. These guys are good. There's talent everywhere. You got to do whatever you got to do to go out there and like do good. And if that's throwing 90% sliders because your slider is a freaking 8% Bullet Johnson late nasty pitch, you're going to throw it 70% of the time. That's probably not that healthy for the ligament itself, right? Especially when we start talking about the age. I'll insert in this video, if you're watching this on YouTube, I have a few tweets that I screenshotted and saved, and I thought they were super interesting. I'm sure a lot of you guys listening to this are very familiar within the topic, so you probably have seen these things. But Dr. James Andrews was asked about the increase in injuries. So I'll read off a quote. I started following the injury patterns and injury rates in the year 2000, Andrew says. Back in those days, I did about 8 or 9 Tommy Johns per year in high school and younger. The large majority of Tommy Johns were at the major league level and the minor league level and the college level, and then just a handful of high school kids. In today's situation, the whole thing is flip-flop. The largest number of is youth baseball. You've surpassed what's being done in the major leagues. That's a terrible situation. So what he's saying is that back in the day, it was major league guys were the most Tommy John guys. Now, back in the day, it was major league guys had the most Tommy Johns. The youngest guys, right, like high school, even the little league, were the lowest amount of Tommy Johns. He's saying it's flip-flop now, where the major league guys are probably the lowest and the freaking high school kids are the highest. So he says that's a terrible situation. Andrew says the obsession with velocity and spin at the youth level is having a devastating impact on arms and games itself. So I was saying with like the design too, we talked a lot about like the design when it comes to the slider. We didn't even really talk about the spin rate aspect of it, but we do have to consider in that third tier of the design, the idea behind spin rate, spin efficiency. I see a lot of times kids will often tend to force manipulation when it comes to like trying to see numbers that the instructor wants to see or their buddy has, whatever it is. Back to this quote, these kids are throwing 90 miles per hour their junior year of high school. He says the ligament itself can't withstand that kind of force. We've learned in our research lab that baseball is a development sport. The Tommy John ligament matures at about age 26. In high school, the red line where the forces go beyond the tensile properties for the ligament is about 80 miles an hour. So he's saying at 80 miles an hour, you're getting into that upper echelon of like the force potential that ligament can have is not equipped with how much force it's going through for that throw. Now, does this mean that if you're a high school kid, you should start throwing slow? No, this to me is just a simple like understanding of how just development works. It's a line of like continuous progression. There's some outliers that will like progress at 11 years old, super quick, right? And then stall out to where the rest of the guys catch up. There's some guys that, will hit a super late growth. I'll never forget, I played with my boy Tyler Glasnow in Pittsburgh when I first got traded over there in 2012, and he was 6'6", kind of similar to my height at the time, through 91, 92. Fast forward X amount of years later, he's throwing 100. Like there's the outliers that kind of do that. But more often than not, it's just a constant linear progression for development. And the reason you have that development like that over the years in the past was because, kids were playing multiple sports. They were just learning about their bodies. They were learning spatial awareness, body awareness, force potential, movement potential, capacity, all these things, man, about their bodies without it being a conscious thing mentally. They're just learning as they move. And now I think there's this idea of like pitching specific stuff. Guys fall in love with it. They enjoy it. So they're going to want to gravitate to doing it more when it comes to pitching. And then you try to be super specific within that task because you enjoy it, which I understand it's tough. Then you get stuck with like only doing that one approach. I'll never forget with having a Randy Sullivan on my podcast back in 2019 talking about like, I remember he used the analogy. If I can find the clip to that, I'll just insert it in this YouTube video, in this podcast. But he was talking about the tensile properties of the actual ligament itself and how that can be, not manipulated, but it can adapt to certain different types of throwing. He said like, it's very similar to if you were driving in a car. If you're driving in a car, you get uncomfortable with one posture, you're going to switch slightly just to kind of get out of that one specific posture to be comfortable again to drive another 100 miles until you got to switch it up again. It's kind of like throwing. The weighted balls, it's a different type of stimulus. Long toss, it's a different angle, it's a different stimulus. It's kind of all of these different variations of a throw are then amplifying the need for the ligament and the tendons to adapt. And when they adapt, they become what? Stronger, right? But if you continuously do the same thing over and over again, the same throw, level shoulders, same weighted ball, 5 ounces, whatever, you do that over and over again. There's no football usage in there. There's no basketball freaking cuts or anything. Like now the adaptation for those ligaments, those muscles, they're only going through a set movement. You're going to limit the amount of adaptation that you can have to that to then increase the resiliency, right, of that tendon. And again, I'm not trying to sit here and sound like a dang doctor, but I've seen this over and over again. And when you kind of sit here and talk about it and bring it to light, it just, I think, I don't know, you tell me, but a lot of the things that I'm saying, I've said this for a long time now, like it makes sense, right? I don't know. That's what I got. Those are 4 tiers to my opinion on it. Let me know what you think. therobbyrowshow.com/ask if you guys want to chat. I've been getting a lot of questions from parents. I appreciate you guys reaching out. I wish I could be of more help when it comes to designing like throwing programs or what. I know a lot of people want to get me to like write up a throwing program for their kid, and that's not really what it's about. That's not what I'm trying to say either. I'm not trying to even say like, hey, like use me to make sure you don't get hurt. That's not at all the message. The message is this simple fact of it is important to adapt to multiple different stimuluses, multiple different movements, and continuously force your body to adapt, meaning the workload. Yes, I understand the regulation behind of it. I understand why we put up these barriers and pitch limits and all these things, but I'll never forget, man, like being a kid, I was very fortunate to have a father that played in the big leagues, but being a kid and just being encouraged to throw, man, like throw a long time, long toss, field ground balls, throw from the outfield. Oh shoot, it wasn't even until like my senior year in high school when, you know, scouts started talking to me a lot that I realized that I should probably like not throw and practice if I was like starting the next day, you know, like when it came to infield, outfield, stuff like that, because I'd always just throw, boom, throw. I always looked at it like this. You get out what you put in, right? So like your body's going to give you back whatever you put into it. So if you're only giving it, you know, like limited tolerance, limited stresses, very regulation and controlled throwing programs, then like that's all it's going to really know. But if you give it high stress stimulus and variation, it's going to now like adapt to the amount of volume. It's going to adapt to the volume, and it's going to adapt to the actual like variations of the throw to be able to do it. That's why I said like when I did the whole 3 arm slot thing, and I'm still kind of doing it, but that was one thing that was like, I need to do this because I need to find out for myself if the things that I'm talking about pertaining to like arm health, elbow health are accurate. And I will say it till I have 0 breath in my lungs, that it is 100% a benefit to be able to deviate your arm angles and complete the task. That's just athleticism though, guys. It doesn't have to be like super overcomplicated. Go out, be a kid, have fun, but also at the same time be mindful of like, I'm not going to grab a 16-pound rock, skip it across the ocean, even though that would be sick too. We could talk about that too, right? Like back in the day. I don't want to be that guy though. I don't want to be the guy that's like, back in my day we did that. No, I'm probably going to turn out to be that guy. Gosh darn it. That's what I got. Let me know. therobbyrowshow.com/ask if you guys want to reach out and ask me your questions. That is all I got. Love you guys. God bless. Till next time, I'm out. See ya.